What's up and welcome back. I'm John Stark from MacMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic, and today we're talking Oscars. Best Picture race. I haven't done this since earlier in the year, and now that we've gotten some film festivals out of the way, Venice, Telluride, TIFF, of course, like earlier in the year stuff like Sundance, South by Southwest, New York Film Festival and London Film Festival are sort of like the last two ones to drop, sort of major contenders. And I guess AFI also this year has some interesting premieres. So we're not completely out of the works yet, but we're getting there. We're starting to see where films are getting sold. There's a film that I'm really interested in that hasn't sold anywhere, The Last Showgirl. It's gotten really good reception and it hasn't been picked up, which I think is really interesting. And I would think at bare minimum, even if you don't want to run it this year, it feels like something that's well positioned for an Oscar run next year. And so the fact that no one has touched it, it's like, I don't know why I really, please don't go Bleecker Street. Please don't go Roadside Attractions. Give that film a chance. I would really love to see Pamela Anderson in an Oscar race just to see what happens. Like, she's gotten legitimate, like, really strong buzz for The Last Showgirl, like, shockingly. And if you put her into a shitty distributor, she's just going to disappear. And that's kind of like the problem with some of the films is that people look at the distributor and they go, I don't know if this film's going to make it. We'll talk about that a little bit here, but distributors matter. So number one, the film that I think is closest to winning, although I don't think, I'm going to say probably out of the first, I would say the first three films right now are all gunning to win. They're currently the three that I think one of the three would win. If you're asking me, I don't have a front runner right now. I have three front runners, which is way better than having in other years where you're like, well, this film is obviously, it's everything everywhere, all the way to the finish. I like it when the race feels more wide open, but I'm putting a Nora at top here. It's Neon. It's the winner out of Cannes. I have some hangups about why, because they haven't embraced Sean Baker at all before. I'm thinking maybe this might be a gateway for Sean Baker without him winning. He could finally get a Best Picture nomination. He could finally get a Best Director nomination. Doesn't necessarily mean he'll win, though. Mikey Madison is really new, and she's gotten great praise, but she's also really new. And will this translate to an actress win for her either? I don't necessarily know, but I do know it's done really well with critics. It's an audience pleaser. So I currently have it at number one, but I'm not too far off with the other two films. So my number two film is Emilia Perez, which is being distributed by Netflix. I actually have an invite to a screening of that in October. And it has possibly three acting nominations. I think the fact that Selena Gomez is in the Oscar talk is really indicative of how strong of a film Emilia Perez is. I think Zoe Saldana makes a lot of sense because Zoe's been around for a while. She has quite a career behind her, and nominating her, if she can get in for a nomination, feels almost like how it's like when Rachel McAdams came close for Spotlight. It was like it was their way of finally getting Rachel McAdams that nomination for a film that was really strong, that was doing really well, that was well liked, and she just kind of came along with it. So I haven't even seen Zoe's performance, and that makes sense to me. Carla Sofia Gascon in lead actress seems like a lock. Director, this seems like a bold choice to make as a director. So possibly, I think this film could also be in for directing. It's being I believe this film has an opportunity to be submitted by 2 different countries, so it could be an international race. Lots of things that could help Amelia Perez become a real contender this year. So it's my number 2 film. Number 3, the other film I think that could win is coming from A24, and that's The Brutalist, which is getting quite a lot of buzz, and I think it overtook Sing Sing. I think when A24 was able to pick up The Brutalist, which had buzz coming in, I think Brady Corbett is going to get a director nomination. Adrian Brody is now the frontrunner for Best Actor. I don't think either Guy Pearce or Felicity Jones will win their categories, but just getting Guy Pearce to a nomination, it would be his first nomination. And Felicity Jones, it sort of is like a little bit of a revitalization of her career after her last Oscar nomination. She hasn't done too much. She kind of felt like she was fading away. So if this can kind of pull her back in and get her better roles, great. So I think The Brutalist, I think people will appreciate the way that the film is made. That old school way of filmmaking. So those are the 3 films. I think if you ask me right now, what do I think is going to win, I'd say one of those 3. Right below that, I've got Conclave coming at number 4 from Focus Features. Focus doesn't really have much else to campaign this year, which is really weird. Last year they had The Holdovers. This year they have Conclave. They have Edward Berger's follow-up after All Quiet on the Western Front. This is a frontrunner possibly for Berger, for director. I would not be surprised. I think he's on the cusp. I think he's gunning for that 5th place spot, and there are a lot of questions. There are still some films that have to be seen. Like, is Ridley Scott really in contention for Gladiator? Is Gladiator 2 a good idea, basically? I know they're trying to do word of mouth, and the word of mouth, like on the street from people who supposedly have seen the film, is really high. So I think Edward Berger is trying to get that fifth spot. It's a film that everybody likes, and it feels very Oscar baity. I think Ralph Fiennes is going to get in. I actually think Isabella Rossellini has a really good chance of getting in because she's never been nominated before, and I think people love those narratives. I've heard she's got one scene, but ever since the Judd Hirsch thing, where Judd Hirsch managed a nomination over Paul Dano, I really haven't, with very little screen time, I'm not really, because I've heard she's in a lot, but her impactful scene is very limited. Which is almost the same case as Anjanou Ellis-Taylor this year in The Nickel Boys. Her screen time is very limited. But between the two of them, Anjanou has an Oscar nomination already. Isabella does not. So, which it feels like she should, right? That Isabella Rossellini should have one, but she doesn't have one. I think it could happen for her. Stanley Tucci may get a nomination in supporting actor. That's a question mark. So Conclave looks pretty strong. I think it's going to get some tech nominations. It's doing well for itself. So that's there. Number 5, Dune Part 2, I think is still in. I think, if anything, the fact that everything else Warner has thrown out has not landed. And so now they're starting to reinvigorate the Dune campaign, and they're starting to host screenings again and get the word back out there because they realize all they've got is Dune. So for people who were wondering, is Dune going to get knocked out of the race? I don't think Dune got knocked out of the race. I still don't think Dune's getting acting nominations, but I think we're going to see a resurgence. Warner Brothers has the money to spend on a campaign. I think things are looking pretty good still for Denis and director. And then it'll pick up a bunch of tech nominations. It may not get as many as the first because this year is just more competitive. Everybody looks at Dune and they're like, well, Dune got all these nominations. Like, well, Dune opened during the pandemic. So of course Dune got all those nominations. So there's that. I think that's where that is. Number 6, with some trepidation, a little bit of trepidation. The fact that it's down at 6 now for me kind of hurts my soul a little bit, but I'm still going with Sing Sing, which is my second A24 film on this list. I'm hearing A24 is planning on, basically they've let their initial campaign die, like their initial horrific theatrical distribution of Sing Sing, um, where there are like our entire film critics that have lived in Sing Sing deserts who haven't even seen it. I mean, there are really prominent critics who haven't seen Sing Sing, which should be troubling to them. The problem is that everybody who has seen Sing Sing loves Sing Sing. Like, it is a universally adored film, so they just need to make everybody see it. So I think they're going to come back around with a second wind campaign. I think this is going to be something that you may not see on streaming for a while. For anybody who's like, oh, it's an A24 film, it'll be on Max. Yeah, in like March. It'll be in Max in like March. it's gonna be a while before you see Sing Sing. Although maybe that's their plan, is to drop it during the Oscar time so that it'll help boost, and then the whole world will talk about it, because what's a better way to get it in front of a million eyes than to put it on streaming? So, yeah, but they could do that for Sing Sing, but I've heard they have not given up on Sing Sing. Obviously, they have lost a little bit of faith, which is why they have Queer, but Queer's not going to get a Best Picture nomination. This still has possibility. I don't think it's going to get director. I think it's lost too much strength and weight. I think it still has very strong contenders for actor and supporting actor, though. As far as anything else, I don't really know. So that's my number 6. Number 7 is, I'm gonna choose to buy into the hype on Gladiator 2 from Paramount. Paramount, interestingly, has a backup plan, which we'll discuss in a minute. If Ridley Scott directed a really solid Gladiator film, I think people are wanting to like it. This film seems like a film where we're ready to rally behind it. 2 sequels in Best Picture top 10 does seem like a lot, but maybe it isn't. Maybe it's not the biggest stretch of the imagination to say that could be in there. So I think possibly we may end up seeing that this year, but it's one of those films that we still have yet to see. So we'll find out soon enough. It's not that far off for Gladiator. Number 8, I'm going with Blitz from Apple Plus. I've heard some people have seen it, and it definitely has changed their way of predicting, but it's supposed to be making its big premiere, I think, at New York Film Festival. And it's really all that Apple has. So if Apple's going to push a campaign behind anything this year, it's going to be Blitz. I know some people loved Fancy Dance and loved Lily Gladstone, but let's face it, that's a pipe dream. I mean, that's like, I love Ghostlight, but I don't think Ghostlight's going to get a nomination. I mean, there are lots of films that I loved, but they're not going to get nominations. So I think Blitz sneaks in. Number 9 is The Nickel Boys for me. I think, again, I look at what Amazon has, Amazon MGM, and I'm like, what else are they running? I think it's Nickel Boys for them. Even this year's Audience Award winner was picked up by Neon. So, which doesn't need it. Neon already has Anora. So that would be a second nomination for them. There's no way that it became a priority for Neon because Anora has such a strong positioning right now. So Amazon having Nickel Boys really just kind of puts that in perspective as far as what else could they possibly be running. And then number 10 right now, I have a lot of things I could put in here, but I'm gonna go with Saturday Night. I think this could be sort of like a Don't Look Up thing. This is a little bit of an early prediction for me, but spooky season I'm gonna be throwing enough horror movie reviews at you that I wanted to try to do some Oscar predictions before that even came out. That plus fall TV season, just I'm going to be pushing enough content at you that I just wanted to try to get this over with. So by the time I come back around to this, I will know the answer to Saturday Night and whether or not audiences responded to it. I think if audiences respond to it, I think this is like Don't Look Up, basically. I think it's a film that will be well liked and represents something that people want to vote for, even if it's not their absolute favorite film of the year. I don't think anybody's favorite film of the year was Don't Look Up, but it still made it into the 10. So I think somehow Saturday Night matching up with the 50th anniversary of Saturday Night Live, it's like free press for the whole year, you know? The problem is that it doesn't really seem like it's headed for any acting nominations. This 10th spot is very in flux, and a lot of rides on premieres coming up. I'm excited to see what happens with Juror number 2, because again, that's Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers could really use something other than Dune, because Joker did not pan out for them. Fox Searchlight has a handful of films. Night Bitch doesn't seem likely anymore. I have a hard time seeing Real Pain in Best Picture. It just feels too small of a film for Fox Searchlight. So the question is, how good is A Complete Unknown? Is it good enough to get in? I don't know. I'm still entertaining the idea of Wicked, but I don't think it's going to get in. It is a part 1, even though they dropped that because they know that advertising part 1 is not good for them business-wise. And I just don't have any faith in the director. I have zero faith in that director to be able to direct a Best Picture nominee. So, but enough people are mentioning it where it's like, yeah, I'll acknowledge that Wicked has an, I guess, outside shot relatively of getting in somehow magically. One of the ones that I thought was really interesting, and because I've noticed it, and I haven't found the answer to the question of why people stopped talking about Seed of the Sacred Fig. It was a really well-liked film. Got picked up by Neon, and seemed like it was on track. It's being submitted by Germany, and the best thing that I could think of why, because I've seen now too many people have done Oscar predictions and have just totally ignored it. The last video I saw them, they were like all over it. So I'm like, why did you guys start talking about it? And the best thing I can think of is a lot of times with international films, the actual debut, the actual theatrical run of the film ends up being in the following year. So then it ends up being eligible only for international feature. And so that could be exactly what's happening with Seed of the Sacred Fig, is that Neon doesn't need it because they have Anora. So they're actually going to theatrically release it in 2025, but it's being considered this year because of it being submitted by Germany. So, yeah. So that's what I think is probably happening. That's my guess, anyway. Wild Robot has a really high RT score, but I don't think it's going to get in this year. I mean, critics are all about Wild Robot. I think it's too strong of a year to get an animated feature in. So those are that's kind of the Best Picture race as I see it right now. Anyway, I'm sure there's some other films that I could talk about, like The Apprentice, for example. Well, Briarcliff is having a really hard time distributing it. They don't have the money. They're trying to crowdfund distribution, which seems really weird. But so I think their ability to campaign for the Oscars is going to be really hard. Now, all they have to do, though, is get enough screeners out, and I think Sebastian Stan gets in the consideration. So I think Best Picture becomes a challenge, but I don't think Sebastian Stan's performance is necessarily outside the realm of possibility. So stuff like that is downstreamed. I think Nosferatu is an interesting thing to throw in the race. If people are going to try to talk about Demi Moore possibly getting a nomination for The Substance, I don't know why we can't talk about Nosferatu. I love when you see people talk, like, snap back and they're like, well, Nosferatu's not an Oscar film, but let's talk about Demi Moore. And it's like, No. If you if you don't want to talk about one, you can't talk about the other. Like, you can either talk about both of them or neither of them, but you can't have it both ways. Um, Pedro Almodovar's film, The Room Next Door, is just doesn't, from everything I've heard, is not a Best Picture contender. That's more of a maybe a director for him, maybe acting for Tilda. But it's looking like maybe slim nominations. Like the chances are dwindling for that as we speak. There are a lot of acting contenders this year that their films just won't get nominated. I don't think Queer is going to get nominated. I've heard that just is a very divisive film the way it's structured. Maria, the reception is for Angelina Jolie. It's not really for the film. Netflix picked that up. The Outrun, Saoirse Ronan's now her new. It's funny how people were like, "What's going to be her big contender?" Well, she's being submitted in lead for The Outrun and supporting for Blitz. So you decide. I don't think that's going to get her in. The Piano Lesson from Netflix has gotten really sort of not consistently great reactions, but things are looking great for Daniel Detweiler, and that's about it. Uh, so that is, yeah, pretty much. If there's a thing out there that you were wondering, it's basically it's been seen. The couple films that haven't been seen are like Juror Number 2, from Warner Brothers, Clint Eastwood's film, which could potentially get nominations for Nicholas Hoult and Toni Collette, which would be interesting because it would be Nicholas's first nomination. Toni Collette hasn't been nominated since The Sixth Sense, which is insane. She has one acting nomination. So if she is at all good in that film, if that film is at all able to get her across the finish line, I think it could happen for her. We've got Here, which is also at AFI, which is Robert Zemeckis' interesting, will they watch a film where the camera never changes perspective? Who knows? And unfortunately, Robert Zemeckis has lost the faith of the film community, and a lot of people are not predicting Here at all for anything, which is sad because Robin Wright has yet to be nominated for an Academy Award. So it would have been nice if this had been a resurgence for her character, for her as an actress, and getting her into the race. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. So there are, yeah, like I said, there are some things that still to come, but not many. Not many things. I would say if you're not screening at a festival, the question would be why. You know, if you still have if you're coming out this year, then why? So that's it. Yeah, I think I don't think there's any other major film that I haven't mentioned that I'm like, oh well, that could get in. I guess September 5th is the other one. Paramount is behind that now. I could also see that getting pushed back to next year if Gladiator really hits, because I don't think they're going to get both. So I just don't. September 5th is sort of like a dark horse. It's this film that a lot of people saw at TIFF and they were like, oh my God. Or Telluride or something like that. It was at one of those festivals and it came really fast, just right at the list. But the problem is, like I said, they do have Gladiator, and I don't care how good September 5th is. If Gladiator 2 turns out to be a crowd pleaser, is good, you know, doing money at the box office. The crazy thing is that Gladiator's like got a Thanksgiving release date, so it's like, where do you put September 5th? Because if you release it before, then you pretty much have locked yourself into a film that is not going to be your number one priority in terms of submitting for Oscar consideration. They're going to want to push Gladiator 2 because of the amount of tech awards that it can get. See, Gladiator 2 not only has the possibility of getting Best Picture, but has a much more well-known director It has Paul Mescal in actor. It has Denzel Washington in supporting actor. I've heard Connie Nielsen's really good in supporting actress. So, I mean, if it's really good, they could get potentially 3 acting nominations out of this film. You've got maybe screenplay. You've got a whole bunch of tech nominations. There's a path, if Gladiator is really good, to get like Paramount 10 nominations. I don't think you can say the same about September 5th. So I think September 5th caps. So I don't see it becoming their number one ever. Just like Neon may have picked up the life of, I can't even remember the name of the film, but everybody was like, oh, it's the audience award winner. Last year was American Fiction, so obviously. I think they're going to hold it because they have a Nora, which is like running most people's lists. Why would you mess that up? You know, when you have the front runner, why would you mess that up? A24, the only reason why they went for the Brutalist was because their Sing Sing pattern was so terrible that they were like, well, I don't know if Sing Sing can actually get nominated, but this can. So, yeah, so it's interesting to look at these things and see what they are. But those are my thoughts. So I will do some acting categories tomorrow. Until then, I'll see you guys on the other side.